do we have any quippy jokes to start this one?
It's not exactly
I saw you press that record button.
Yeah, of course I pressed the record button. We needed a quip.
Quip.
Quip?
Quip.
It's done.
Wow.
Can't take
we're
it back now. Can't take it back now.
Good morning, afternoon, and or evening, everyone. Well, I guess in this case, afternoon, which is really weird. Well, I guess for a weekday, it's weird. But anyway, thank you for tuning back in and hanging out with us. As always, we are the Genesius guys. I'm Nick.
Filling in for Kyle, I'm Seth.
And I'm John.
And we're three Catholic dudes who love to talk about movies. This is the Genesius podcast, and we are back, baby.
We're back.
We're back. Oh, it feels good.
It
Feels
does.
good to be
we
back.
kind of missed our initial attempt to come back. I got sick. Sorry.
There was a lot of scheduling kerfuffles we had to work around, but
we
made it work.
Yeah. Well, and you know,
trying to coordinate three active guys' schedules is kind of a.
I mean, to be fair, we have designated recording days, but yeah, Seth got sick, so that kind of threw some stuff through a loop, but we made it work. We're here. We're doing it.
well,
Kind of live.
I thought maybe with the alternate date and time that like I could ask Kyle to come in and actually like be a part of the show.
You know,
in
it's
my
so funny
stead.
because I thought about that as well.
Yeah, and no, he just said no.
So why couldn't you make it?
Yeah, what's his excuse this time?
Yeah.
He said no, and then he threw a cloak over himself and disappeared. Yeah. So
Did he get it for Christmas?
yeah, he said
Did
it
it
was.
come from a really old man?
He said it was actually from his aunt.
Oh.
Huh.
So I don't really know.
He could be here for all we know.
He could be right behind us.
Kyle?
Yeah. Kyle, if you're here, no. I'm sorry. So, but yeah, I mean, so what? Hold on, my brain just completely went. Why don't you guys say something because I'm still
Mandalorian
recovering.
finished last night.
Mandalorian
At the time of
yeah.
recording, at least.
Yeah. You guys, you had 2 episodes to catch up on, right? You had to watch the before the finale and then the finale, and I just did the finale because I was up to date.
I had trouble sleeping the night it dropped, so I woke up at like 3:00 in the morning, and I couldn't figure out how to get back to sleep. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna watch Mandalorian, and I watched it, and then I went back to bed.
Yeah.
It's like a lullaby to Nick's ears is watching Mandalorian.
He falls asleep to the credits, you know?
I was smiling as I was drifting back to sleep. I was incredibly satisfied with that finale.
It was fun.
So there's also something else that finished since our last podcast.
What on Earth also finished since last podcast? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Lent finished.
Oh.
Wow, I'm dumb.
Well, Lent. Yeah, they're definitely.
Oh, that's not what you're talking about.
But I meant the volleyball league also ended.
That's right. Oh yeah. Wow. How did I forget that? Man, that was a fun season.
It was.
That was really fun.
Can I digress for a moment and talk about Mando? Because there was something that was really interesting.
Wait, what?
We're digressing to talk Star Wars. This never happens.
This never happens at all.
Agreed.
And so there's something interesting about this, and that is that Mandalorian spends the whole season not wanting to settle down, but then he gets like a deed for a house from Grief Karga at the end. Spoilers. And
if you haven't watched
if
you haven't watched season 3 of The Mandalorian, this is your official spoiler warning.
Well, and to be fair, this is not going to be a surprise to most listeners who have already been watching the season because Grief offers him this.
Hold on,
he
quick
offers it from the
tangent off the
beginning.
tangent. You did press record on the camera, right?
Yes, it has a little red border around the screen, and that's
Okay,
how you-
cool.
Yeah.
All right. I just want to make sure because we've had technical errors before.
It's a good double check. It's a good double check. But
Anyway, so Mando is now living in a cabin in the middle of a field.
What I loved
with his
about
child.
Yeah, what I loved about this is it kind of reminds me of Skyrim because if you do enough side quests in any particular city for like the ruler of that city, you can buy a property in the city.
Yeah.
So it really just felt like he had completed all the side quests for Navarro and was now just like the Thane of Navarro.
There was definitely some episodes that reminded me of video games, I would say.
It's a lot of side quests.
Yeah.
It was, including Jack Black was there at some
Oh
point
gosh.
for whatever reason.
Okay, can we talk about that episode just for a little bit?
Talk about it
There were-
or scold it.
Mostly scold it.
Very good.
Mostly scold it.
It's my style.
So there were 3 really big guest appearances in this episode.
Mhm.
There was Jack Black, which was immediately distracting. Not terrible, because I think Jack Black could work in the Star Wars galaxy. Like, I don't know if this was necessarily the right spot to put him in, but I think Jack Black being in the role he was actually works very well. Lizzo just shouldn't have been in Star Wars, period. Because actually, I'm going to be honest. So I don't listen to Lizzo music, nor have I been to a Lizzo concert. So I actually did not recognize her until the credits rolled.
Same. I've only heard her name before.
I'm literally just like, I feel like I know who this is. And then the credits rolled. I'm like, that was effing Lizzo? Really?
Well, I was just thinking, like, who is that? I've never heard of Lizzo.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's Christopher Lloyd, the legend that he is. Like, Christopher Lloyd.
I was going to say the
fantastic.
second he talked, I knew it was him.
I mean, there had been rumors going around that Christopher Lloyd was going to be in Mandalorian, and I was excited because I pretty much love everything I've seen him in, which really is mostly Back to the Future and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But
I actually have never seen that movie. I've only played
Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good movie. It's a really good movie. Anyway, like Christopher Lloyd was out of the 3 big guest stars. I think Christopher Lloyd is an actor that probably works the best in something like Star Wars.
You know, what I really wish would have happened is one of 2 things.
Lizzo not being the episode.
If you're good, well, no, that's a given. That's not one of these options. That's a requirement. But if you're going to have Jack Black in there, do one of 2 things. One, give him a character where it makes sense for him to be the way that he is, which I think would have worked really well voicing like a droid at that droid bar.
Where now that you say that, that would have been a lot better.
He could have either been like a patron or the bartender.
Kind of like how Taika Waititi voices IG-11.
Yeah, like give him
actually,
an opportunity to
that,
do that,
for sure.
so that way we're not distracted by his physical presence. Or
He'd be
if
like
you're
Chopper in Rebels.
or if you're gonna have him actually there, have him act completely outside of his typecast, because he's typecast. Let's be clear here. He plays a very specific kind of character. But it would have been really interesting to stick him in a very dramatic, no-nonsense part.
I think they had a good opportunity to do that in that episode, though.
A little bit, not too much.
They addressed that he was a formal Imperial officer.
He was a former Imperial.
Which that alone, I think, would have been good setup to give him something a little bit more dramatic.
The hard part is that they've already sang that song in part of the season. And so it just didn't, to me, it didn't make sense to rehash that with yet another character for the sake of having a Jack Black cameo.
It's really funny because I watched that episode right after watching the Super Mario Brothers movie. Where did you guys go see that yet?
I've not.
I've not.
You know, I will say this. This is something we're actually something we're gonna cover in the few weeks here, just a few weeks or so, with 2 very special guests who are passionate, who loved the movie so much they saw it twice the day it came out. I was with them the second time they saw it, and man, I will say this is all I'm going to say, because 1, where you want to get to the movie, and 2, we'll go in depth more when we talk about it with these guys. But as someone who did not grow up with playing the games or knowing the lore, I thought the movie was excellent.
Well, and I've heard it's from if you're looking for a well-written, like sophisticated film,
It's not that.
it's not that.
It's definitely not that.
I've heard it's just a good time in general. Although I heard one person critique, I think it's Anna Taylor-Joy as Peach, as the actress, as like every time Peach opened her mouth, they were like, I was taken out of the movie. I just couldn't. I don't know if that'll be true for me, but
Well,
I didn't think that, but
no,
okay.
It is what it is. I'm excited. I've heard that the Chris Pratt's fine. I've heard he's fine as a character. I've heard Jack Black is a standout role.
Jack Black, I probably would say was the best part of the movie.
So I'm
Him
excited.
as Bowser was an unexpected gem, I think, because with a villain like Bowser, I would expect them to get someone a little more like ominous. But the fact they got Jack Black to do it, and not only was he kind of scary at times, but just also really flippin' funny. Just that was perfect casting right there.
Yeah. So I'm excited. Well, shall we get into the film that we're talking about today?
Yes, we shall.
We have finally arrived at talking about Arrival.
You know, I made that joke when I came here today.
And I didn't like it.
I thought it was.
So you decided to
It was good.
repeat
Well,
it?
It was a good joke.
It was a good joke. No, I just fired back and said the door just closed behind you. Go back out. But it was a good joke. I'll give you that.
Yeah. Arrival.
Yeah, directed by Denis Villeneuve, written by
Is that how you say his name?
Denis Villeneuve. It's French.
Yeah.
I mean,
Or
duh.
Villeneuve.
Je ne sais quoi.
so basically in French, you just say about half the word
Yeah.
and you call it good.
Yeah, that's fair.
Written by Erica Heiser, also composed mostly by the great what's his name?
I should really put these
Uh,
the composer.
yeah, because I can't
in their
hold
notes
on.
here.
I know the person I'm talking about.
I want to
just
say
can't-
Philip Glass, but he
No.
composed the score for another movie we're talking about very soon.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this composer Johan Johansson.
Oh, I've heard of him.
He is unfortunately no longer with us. And the music that is present at the start and the end of the movie is actually by Max Richter, and it's from another film, but the track is called "On the Nature of Daylight," and it's from the Blue Notebook.
Huh.
And so this,
Interesting trivia.
I would assume, based on how that worked, I would assume that this was temp music. That is to say, Denis Villeneuve put this in and was like, I want music that is kind of like this, maybe. And then they just never quite got anything that gave him the vibe like the temp music. And so he just stuck with it. I don't know if that's exactly how that worked, but I can imagine that being what happens when they produce a film, because I've I've read and listened to a lot of material from composers who will say that the director will have a very specific idea in mind and they'll give you like a soundtrack from another movie.
Mm-hmm.
But then sometimes they'll be so attached to that soundtrack that they'll just keep it there.
What
right?
what else has Johan Johansson done?
Other notable works include
'Cause I know I've
Theory
heard
of
that name.
Everything, Sicario, Prisoners. A lot of Prisoners, Sicario, and Arrival are all Denis Villeneuve joints.
I mean, it's pretty common that film composers and directors are often in pairs. Like you get like most Robert Zemeckis movies have Alan Silvestri composing, or like Spielberg and John Williams.
So did for Blade Runner, the 2049.
He started working on it, and then they wanted to take it a different direction. So they
Is that when Hans Zimmer started?
that's when Hans Zimmer took over. So I imagine a lot of the atmospheric motifs might have come from Johan Johansson.
Because Hans Zimmer did amazing with Dune,
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
Yes, he did.
but
that he did.
Oh,
incredible.
that's where I've heard the director's name before. Okay.
yep, he did Dune.
That's right.
And
I forgot
Blade
he did
Runner
Dune.
2049.
Denis Villeneuve is.
I didn't see Blade Runner 2049, but I did see Dune.
Let me just gush for a moment. Denis Villeneuve is probably one of the best directors of our time at the moment. He is really good at capturing scale, and he can do action, but he focuses more on the weight of whatever he's presenting. And so, especially this movie, there's not a lot of action in this film.
Yeah.
But it's very clear that like he wants you to think about the content that he's showing you on the screen. He wants you to think about the shots.
Man, did he? I mean, this is my first time watching this. Man, did he really mess with my brain with this movie?
Yeah.
See, okay. I put him and Nolan as like the two directors nowadays that I think are some of the best living directors.
I can see that.
Like they're also, I think at least with this movie, they're very similar with like content, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I would argue that Denis
They take it, they're definitely different perspectives on
Yes.
the similar things, but
Well, and I would say that like Denis Villeneuve is really great at capturing the same kind of scale and wonder that Nolan puts in his films, but he manages to do it, I think, with a lot more of a personal touch. And it feels like there's something like super expansive about what Nolan does. And Villeneuve tends to like pull you into whatever he's working on. So I don't know. It just feels a little bit more personal when I'm watching something from Denis Villeneuve as opposed to Christopher Nolan.
Anyway, so this movie came out November 11th, 2016, with a budget of $47 million, and it made a little over $200 million in the box office.
Yep.
Rotten Tomatoes was pretty friendly to it. Critics gave it a 94. Audience gave it an 82. And the Rotten Tomatoes consensus says, Arrival delivers a must-see experience for fans of thinking person's sci-fi. I hope I read that right.
Yep.
That anchors its heady themes with genuinely affecting emotion and a terrific performance from Amy Adams. Yeah, that was probably the best acting I've ever seen from Amy Adams.
Yeah. It's
by
really good.
far.
It's really
isn't
fantastic.
she Enchanted? Right?
Yeah. She's just. I was gonna say
I was like
she's
trying to
Giselle
think of like,
Enchanted.
what other movie she was in. I was like, oh, yep.
In my opinion, probably the most underrated Disney movie of all time.
Enchanted?
Yeah, that's my opinion.
I don't think it's underrated. It had a big cultural moment when it came out. Like I remember I was in choir during like the sixth like 6th through 8th grade, right? But one of our concerts, we did like the Enchanted.
Okay,
so it had a big
hey,
cultural
but
moment.
it's a baller soundtrack though.
The thing is, like, I've only recently seen it, but like,
Did you watch
I
the
had
sequel?
heard about. Yeah, I watched it right before the sequel. The sequel
I actually liked the sequel. I thought it was pretty good.
Love Power.
Love power.
It sounds like Flower Power or something. I don't know. It just did not rub me the right way.
What button did you just press?
I didn't press a button. I was really tempted to press agreed. But then John piped in.
Okay. So the USCCB classified this as an A3 for adults.
Yep.
John, do you want to read the consensus?
Sure.
It is like your thing.
I feel like
It's a running joke now.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
quick context for our listeners. I'm no longer going to do a summary because the consensus typically has a little mini summary in it.
Yeah.
But I
Pretty
feel
much.
like now that I have nothing to do, that there's no.
No, you got plenty to. You're running the entire board. So.
That's true. That's true. So I'm doing my own work.
Okay.
And not in a cave with a box of scraps.
Yes.
Yes.
Agreed.
Continue, John.
Mesmerizing and unusually intimate science fiction drama about an American linguist, the excellent Amy Adams.
That was actually in there, by the way. I did not.
The excellent.
I did not editorialize that. That's what it said. Continue.
Trying to communicate with aliens inside a spacecraft hovering over a Montana field. One of a dozen such vessels that have descended at various spots around the globe, and which threaten to trigger panic and geopolitical instability. Director Denis Villeneuve.
I've heard it both ways.
Yeah.
Adaptations of a short story by Ted Chiang.
Just
Probably
Chang.
like Chang. Yeah.
Chang finds profundity on a human scale as well as in the cosmos. And while technically impressive, it owes the bulk of its melancholy, mystical power to Adam's gripping performance. Regardless of whether the underlying science is logically coherent or meshes with Christian thought, the primary values inviced are consonant,
yeah.
with a Catholic worldview, probably acceptable for mature adolescents, some potentially frightening scenes, and a single instance of rough language.
This movie, first of all, whoever wrote this must be a huge Amy Adams fan.
Well,
And also really
Amy
whipped out the
Adams.
thesaurus for some of this stuff.
Yeah,
I was like, dang,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, John.
I feel like all the ones I have to read have some word that I've never heard
You're
before,
just getting ravaged here.
had to happen sometime.
Yeah. So, first of all, I want to point out the cinematographer on this film is Bradford Young. Other notable work, Selma, When They See Us, Solo, A Star Wars Story.
Yo. Sorry, I loved Solo.
Yeah. Let's see. What else?
I know you didn't.
I mean, it's okay. It's just not my choice, right? He's done a whole bunch of movies, but the last one that he did was Solo. But he's a really fantastic cinematographer, and it shows in just how this film does not have a lot of bold coloring. It tends to like wash all of the scenes in particular palettes of color, and it's really like watching a painting almost with some of these shots, especially the ones like from the side where they're on the little scissor lift looking up into the ship and you have them jumping. It's just like, so much of this just messes with your brain. When they first get into the ship, they're doing like this slow, I can't exactly remember if it's where they move the camera out and zoom in, or they move the camera in and zoom out, but they're doing one of those weird kind of horror zoom
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
effects. Yeah.
I think it's like the background zooms out and it zooms in on the focus.
There's definitely names for those shots.
Yeah, there's a name for that.
What that's called.
Yeah,
Wait,
but
I have Wi-Fi
they're
here.
called they're basically horror shots. They're known for being in horror films because they're unsettling.
yeah.
But the technique is to either pull the camera.
I think you pull the camera back and zoom it in
yes,
at the same time.
At the same time.
Yeah.
So it's a very well-known technique for creating very unsettling shots.
Effective technique too.
Incredibly effective.
Every time I've seen it used, it's been used to pretty much perfection for what they were going for.
Yeah, and that first scene, right? They really want you to feel unsettled about like where they are.
So
Speaking,
I wonder, like, just in a way. So, for instance, I would almost put this similar to him, Nolan, and I mean, I know this may be like crazy talk, but Stanley
crazier
Kubrick.
thing.
Kubrick.
I would agree with that.
Put, like, just for instance, in like 2001. Let's say like all three.
Don't get me started on 2001.
But what I mean like is that I think there's just unique things that you can do in a sci-fi genre of like this movie, Arrival, Interstellar, and 2001. I think they just do like
with
really
the opening
unique.
20 minutes being monkeys either fighting or screwing each other.
I'm not saying I'm a huge fan of that movie, but I do think it did very innovative things.
Seth, you look like you're.
I've never seen the film.
The beginning, okay, legitimately,
Oh, boy.
I watched the beginning of that movie.
Maybe we should.
Like the
maybe we
first
should talk
half
about
hour,
that.
it's just monkeys, and it's like I watched it at 1.5 speed. When I watched the movie because there was nothing going on.
I'm gonna be honest. Last time I watched it, I was a teenager, so I was bored almost immediately. I'm sure if I watched it now, I'd have
But the
more of an
music was
appreciation.
You'd be
amazing.
bored after 30 seconds.
So
instead of immediately.
That's fair.
if nothing else, you do know the music from that movie.
Oh yeah, yeah, of course. I don't want copyright strikes.
But
It's such such an iconic theme that you hear it in all kinds of pop culture. Like they play that song in the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory remake. Do you remember?
I've never seen that movie, but that
Let's
sounds
boogie.
really good.
Oh my gosh, so many unbelievably strange movies we could discuss on this show.
I think what I'm just getting at is that like there's just so many techniques you can do in something that's sci-fi that just like blows your mind that I feel like you can't do in other genres.
I want a rom-com shot like Arrival. I think this is a brilliant idea. I want them to be like looking down a hallway, and I want that far out shot where it's just like mind-bending angles. I want the horror zooms and everything. Like, give me...
And there's a couple making out front and center.
That's not quite the direction I was going, but, you know, schmaltz it up, I guess. But really what I was thinking about is like, imagine when's the last time you had a rom-com where the cinematography made you feel things and not the dialogue or the lead actor and actresses or actors?
That would require me actually watching rom-coms.
Wait, what about Princess Bride?
Oh, okay, sure, that could be considered.
I want Princess Bride shot like Arrival.
Oh my gosh, that would be crazy.
That'd be like Lord of the Rings, almost epic. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine having this a massive production scale, and then you just have, you know, suddenly out of nowhere, it's just like,
let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
massive wide angle, right? You know, big music hit. I think it would be amazing.
So speaking of
speaking
of mind bending,
do you want to make a disclaimer before we
Okay.
go too much into this movie?
yeah.
Right?
What disclaimer? Tell me. What was my disclaimer?
So unlike other movies, I think this one's actually very important to have seen the movie before.
Look, this goes with all of us. If you're listening to this podcast or you're watching us right now,
But like this one, there is like legitimate spoilers that I think take away from the movie.
And after Seth makes his disclaimer, I actually do want to talk about what's probably the biggest spoiler in the movie. But Seth, please give your disclaimer.
yeah, I really appreciate our listeners and viewers who are who really enjoy our banter and come for the banter, and that's really cool. And just for us talking about the movies, we really encourage that you also watch these films as well. If you have time, if you don't, whatever, but especially a film like Arrival.
Maybe we should start talking about what movie we're doing next, so then they can watch it before listening to the episode.
That's not a bad idea. But also, like, they have time to listen to it after it comes out. It's not like
That's a good
24
point,
hours and
yeah.
it's gone. Like, you'll never see it again.
Yeah, we're not Snapchat.
I mean, maybe there's some people that like every Friday they tune in and listen to it, but like, I imagine people also watch it and then listen to it after they watch it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting people hovering their mouses over the refresh button or hovering their finger over F5 on the
You
keyboard.
say that, but there's going to be that one guy.
Just like the end of Social Network where he's just like keeps refreshing it to see
If you're that one guy
change.
or gal, right, reach out to us. We would love to interview you. It'd be interesting.
This is the demographic that we're going for. What
I think it would be fun. But in any event, this is a movie that is really, it is a good movie. And I've heard, I
think it's like, I wouldn't put it on the same level, but I do think it's similar to The Passion where it is very artistic.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it is definitely worth watching.
Yeah. And it's worth noting that this is a sci-fi film, but I don't really think of it as a sci-fi film. It really reads like a drama in a sci-fi framework.
Yes.
Or sorry, it's a drama framework, but it's in a sci-fi setting and a concept.
That's a really good way to describe it.
Yeah, because there's not action per se in this movie. There's not a ton, like the one action scene, quote unquote, that happens is like you kind of notice that it's happening from afar. You see all of the setup that's going into it and you see that it's happening. You're not there on the ground watching these people fight.
Yeah,
You know?
it's almost like in the background in a way.
It's supposed to be providing context for what's going on. So this movie really takes its time for you to look at everything and think about what you're seeing.
Well, and I mean, and this is the point I was going to make. There's a reason that they do that, and it's like, okay, so have you guys seen it before? Talking about it for the episode.
Yes.
Okay, this was my first time seeing this movie, and the whole like I will admit I was confused for a good chunk. Like I understood the whole like linguistics stuff. Like I thought that was really clever. Like this is an incredibly well written movie.
Yes.
And then like the flashbacks or visions she was getting, I was like, okay, these are significant, but why? And it was talking, and like I was really confused because I thought they were flashbacks. Little did I know that
They're flash forwards.
they're flash forwards.
Yeah.
Where she is seeing essentially what is going to happen. And that more than anything really made me think.
When I went to
I think that's
John.
that's kind of the concept of this type of movie is that it's like you're supposed to be like questioning what's going on, and you're not like it wants you to keep thinking like it.
Oh, yeah,
it
no,
shows you because it's the first scene, right?
I understand that. And like
And you're just
I
like,
appreciate like I love when movies
Yeah.
do that.
Mhm.
I'm saying it made me think on the sense that like how on earth, and I mean it's like how on earth did she live through all of this knowing how it was going to play out without really knowing how it was going to play out? Like, I mean, well, and it's like most of the movie pretty unpredictable, but like, come on, like once you figured out that she was seeing visions from the future, like you knew Jeremy Renner was the dad of her kid.
Yeah.
that
I
left
mean,
her.
I don't think they were trying to make it feel like this is like some kind of amazing revelation, but I think. Did you want to continue? Like, I have a long conversation. I feel
So-
about this that.
It's kind of a bit of a personal story and also talking about sort of the big twist of the film here. And so when I kind of saw this movie on a whim with my buddy Daniel in college, we saw a review of it and we are just kind of like, let's just go
Let's check it out.
check it out, right? And see what it's about. And we went in, and when they finally reveal kind of what's been going on, and my brain like reshuffles all the pieces and re-understands. I felt like Sherlock from that BBC series.
Oh, that's a good show.
It was just like all of the things clicking into place in front of me, and my mind was just absolutely blown.
Yeah.
Which I probably, in hindsight, right, 2020, it shouldn't have surprised me maybe that much. But in the same vein, this is
It was structured very much like a Nolan movie, that's for sure.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like it reminded me kind of Inception with how like
I mean, not having seen as many Nolan films as you guys have, I was just thinking about The Prestige on how just how much it kept bouncing around the timeline.
yes.
That's what I was thinking of.
Honestly, it's probably the closest to Memento if you've ever seen that.
I've seen.
So it's a movie that
I've seen
starts at
half
the
of-
beginning and the
Yeah.
end, and the end of the movie is
Well,
the middle.
it's really
of the
funny.
movie.
In college, we actually watched Memento in Psych 101 class. We didn't finish it. Like we maybe only watched the first half of the movie, and then I just
How on
never
earth
bothered
can you
to
only
read-
watch half that? It would make no sense, basically.
It didn't make sense to me.
Because like
We didn't even
reason
bother
it
to finish
finally
it.
makes sense at the end of the movie.
I think I need to rewatch it. I know Brooklyn Nine-Nine does a parody of that movie, and probably one of the funniest ways you could think of.
So one of the things that's really interesting to me about this, what this recontextualizing does to the viewer experience for this film, is you start to understand that Amy Adams' character, what is even her name?
Louise.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've had a very blurry past week, so that Louise is a blank slate of a person in a lot of ways. Like she does not have a lot of people in her life. She lives out on this isolated, beautiful lake house. That I
Oh
have,
gosh, I was like, I want to live there.
I have no understanding of how she could afford that with a professorship, right? I don't know.
But I think this is a contention. But I think it's worth it because I think that house is really like the view is amazing.
Oh, yeah,
and like
gorgeous.
it's totally because it looks so good.
yeah,
Versus it actually making sense that she could afford. I mean, it's similar to like how on earth
She probably inherited it for all we know.
her mom's
True.
still alive.
But it kind of like I don't know. I guess it's a bad analogy, but it's like Friends where you kind of let it slide. Like there's no way they could afford living in New York or like where they work.
But yeah, you go after your dreams. Yeah.
Okay, but like in Friends, Monica inherited that apartment, I think.
But still, how is Rachel able to afford it being like a coffee?
Because she comes from a prissy rich family where everything was handed to her until she actually understood the value of work.
And Joey, who's like does not even get by acting, somehow lives in an apartment across the way.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, doesn't matter.
Yeah, pretty much anything like that set in New York. It's just like, I'm a food blogger. And you're like, oh, so you're homeless? I didn't know. That's a big oof. Sorry. But
Anyway.
it's like House Hunters where they're like, she's a food blogger. I am a writer. And our salary or our budget for a house is 1.2 million. And you're like, what?
Because that's realistic.
Yeah. So, but anyway, Louise seems like a blank slate in a lot of ways as a person because you get this sense at the start of the movie, it seems like she's grieving.
Can you hear the rain through these headphones?
No, it's gated. You'll be fine. Like you'll hear it when we're speaking, but the noise cancellation works out. Yes, listeners and viewers, it's raining right now. Sorry.
Yeah, it's Minnesota where it goes from 90 one week to snowing the next.
Oh
and now
my
it's
gosh.
actually like spring where it's raining.
Yeah,
So.
listeners, if you don't live in the Midwest and you ever want to live here, just a warning, weather patterns aren't exactly consistent.
Spring and fall are confusing.
No, winter, like it's mostly winter, but spring and fall, it just like, I don't know. For some reason, when God was thinking of weather patterns in the Midwest, he thought it'd be fun to scramble them in that specific area and nowhere else.
I don't want to talk about it.
Anyway,
So,
back to the movie.
you know,
I found it crazy that it was like 90. But anyway.
to quote myself on Sunday when it was snowing, I was wearing shorts 2 days prior.
Yep.
yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I was playing
too.
outside in shorts.
It
and a
was
t-shirt.
so nice.
But
And then
Anyway. This happened. So, you know, there's a very interesting aspect of this film that I don't necessarily think it was intended to be pro-life in how it's written across, but Louise is presented with a future and perceives a future where she has her daughter Hannah.
it was a surprisingly pro-life movie.
yes,
Yeah.
that's what I thought when I first saw it.
And I don't even necessarily even think about it from that perspective, but more just so she is given this vision of a life that is going to be very challenging for her.
And it's going to like give her a lot of grief.
It's going to break her heart. It's going to break
If it didn't already.
Ian's heart. I think Ian is his name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to break Ian's heart. Hannah is going to die fairly young. And she is given the choice in some ways whether or not to accept that. And instead she chooses to embrace what life brings her and even knowing the challenges that it will have. And it's interesting to think about, like, you pick up on the fact that Ian, when he eventually does find out that she knew, he gets incredibly angry and leaves.
And rightfully angry.
Yeah. And you get the sense.
We're not
that-
justifying that he should have left.
Yeah. Well, you do get the sense that, like, I think Hannah at one point says, "Daddy doesn't look at me the same way anymore." And that hit me really hard because I immediately in my mind thought he already is in some ways probably grieving for her at that point. And is like sees her as dead in a way and is trying to separate himself from that.
Maybe she shouldn't have told him what was going to happen.
Well, it's really interesting. Just and I think there's multiple different things about this movie that are like very fascinating. But One of them I think that you're kind of tackling is like, if you knew your future, would you still live that way?
I wrote that down as a discussion topic is it worth it to know your future?
Yeah.
That's
and
really,
I think the pro-life aspect of it is that even though there is suffering, even though there is hardship, it is still worth it. Like it is still worth living.
It's it's a really just, it's a head scratcher for sure, because it's like, it's really funny just the way our culture is today. Like when it comes to like talking about like movies and such, we don't want to be spoiled. And yet it's just like, well, what are we supposed to do with our lives? God, give us the answer.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But sometimes you kind of have to just, you kind of have to trust him and live it out without necessarily knowing the outcome, because like he knows what's going to happen. He's got a plan, and he's going to guide you to get there. And anything God's got in store for you is 100,000 infinity% worth it.
Yeah. Well,
And that made no numerical sense.
it's 3,000% worth it.
I'd say so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
That's how much he loves us.
I think he loves us more than 3,000.
You're gonna have a lot of fun editing this video.
Yeah.
It is kind of fascinating just the like how these aliens perceive time is similar to God in time.
Yeah.
That it's all simultaneously.
I don't think it's simultaneous. I think it's,
I mean, like
it's like the quantum
they're kind
realm.
of outside of time.
Time runs differently for them than it does for us. So like it's probably one of those things where it's like 1,000 years for us could be like one day for the aliens, of course. And I mean, it's hard to compare that to God, because like 1,000 years for us, for God, it's like the teeniest fraction of a second, if not just all at once.
But also like they know kind of what the outcome, because they see time differently, and that they know the outcome. Whereas like God kind of knows what the outcome is and gives you the option.
Yeah.
Whereas the aliens do that, but it's like, I mean, it's like, I feel like it's like if you are having visions, and I've seen a lot of shows where like a character will give you a vision of the future, and it's like, and then it's like oh, it's not a future they want, and they'll try to like change it so it prevents that from happening. But of course, their actions like fulfill that prophecy anyway. So like, so I don't know if it would be worth it to know what your future is, because it's like you could do just about anything, and yet you're still somehow going to get there.
Yeah.
Well, that's if there's like predestination, right?
That's fair.
I mean, knowing the future doesn't necessarily mean you know how you're going to get there.
Right. That's kind of what I'm somewhat getting at.
So in that sense,
well, it's hard to say, because like God has a plan laid out for us, and yet he knows whether or not we are going to follow that plan.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like, it's one of those things that like, it's almost too much for me to think about, because it's like, I want to follow his will, but I'm scared of the possibility that I won't. And he's going to know that.
Yeah. It's a lot of big
it's not
stuff.
like you're cursed if you choose to like step off the path a little bit. Like there are ways of getting back onto what his like plan is for you. And it's not like there's only, I don't know. It's definitely a mystery. It's something that really only God knows.
Well, and so God knows what's going to happen, right? And the thing is, when people try to sort of bring that definition of God more into like human description or human language, you quickly lose the fact that God is above any way that we can describe him. And so in that sense, it's right. It's like the whole thing that they propose of like, well, can God create a boulder that he can't lift? Is a question I've heard. And my response to that is the idea of not being able to do something does not exist for God. So you're basically trapping yourself in a human concept of limitation, like a universal concept of limitation. So it's, at least for time, the same thing kind of goes, right? Mm-hmm. Where he is outside of time. It's not that he necessarily, like 3,000 years is a snap for him. It is, but that's because he sits outside of time. And so he reaches in, right? I kind of think of it as like he's weaving a large tapestry and he knows what the final result will look like. And the whole thing is being woven from one end to the other. And then kind of like in Lord of the Rings, the discord of Melkor, because God is playing a song. And this
it's been a while since I've watched those movies.
Yeah, so God is playing a song, essentially, and the devil is trying to create discord, and God just keeps building it into his melody. So he takes whatever discord is there, and he weaves it back into the music, and then creates a new movement. Huh. And so same thing with the tapestry. Like the devil comes in and like cuts a thread here or ties a knot there, and God just works it into the design.
Mm-hmm. That's wild.
Yeah. We're getting a little like metaphysical here.
We're getting, this might arguably be, well, I think this episode and an episode releasing in 2 weeks, I think is probably going to be some of the most philosophical we get.
This is the Thinking Man's Genesius podcast.
So the thing is, like,
that's good. I love when we can get deep and philosophical like this.
I like, to me, these are kind of the best movies, are movies that make you think about things like that. Like, cause like,
100%.
What else would, like, I mean, there are other ways of coming up with like this kind of conversation, but like watching something that makes you think and want to discuss like a concept like that, I think is very profound.
John, that's the whole existence of the Genesius podcast.
but like, for instance, there's some that like make you think more than others, I would say. You are an old man and a fool.
Gotta run it in there.
Well done.
But like, for instance, like, I don't think we would be having the same kind of conversation from Pitch Perfect or Princess Bride. I don't think it's quite the same.
No, but like, I mean, I think there's something to take away from every movie. It's just sometimes you look, but not, I mean,
the Hobbit trilogy.
but you can take something away. You could take something away from The Room.
Yeah, don't make The Room.
I mean, like, well, no, my point is, and I mean, again, this is the whole reason I had the idea for this podcast in the first place. It's because like you can, and like I listened to an episode of Just a Guy in a Pew that actually talks about like movies and like how God works through those. I'll have to send you guys a link to that episode because it was really good. But like I think it doesn't matter how good a movie is, how bad a movie is, how campy a movie is. There's always something in there that is touching on a topic related to truth.
Agreed.
That's what I'm getting at. Like I think which is why I think you can take something away from any movie you watch, and I think there's a lot of things in movies that are worth talking about. Like movies like this, it's like there's a lot to cover, but like next week when we talk about the Avengers, like there's gonna be stuff to. There's probably not as much deep stuff to talk about there, but there are still conversations to be had about truth and living an authentic lifestyle with God at the center.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are our final thoughts here before we score?
I just wanted one quick question just of the, because I feel like the concept that they're trying to get at this movie, besides like the time, is also learning a different language changes how you think about something. Like, right? That's kind of like the What are just like quick thoughts on that? I think it's really interesting because I understand like there's so many different cultures in the world, and like how language affects how they think about certain things.
Never even. That was actually another really cool reveal for me was how like because they had like the whole like circle splashes and whatnot, and I'm just like. I was really confused. And then as I explained that, I'm just like, oh, like there's like real roots in the way they're communicating. And I thought that was insane. That was insanely cool. But yeah, it really does. I think knowing, and granted, I'm like not really that proficient in like English or French. Those are the only two languages I really ever took. But like, I think there is something about learning another language that does give you more perspective on a culture and like help you understand. Like it's one of those things where it's like, it kind of connects the world together. Right. I think that's what's so cool about, I mean, even just like living in the US, like there's thousands of different like cultures that exist just in this really small patch of land that we live on.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's interesting when you get the opportunity to like, meet somebody who like we talked about our friend Nipun, who's originally from like Sri Lanka, and hearing about his experience there and him, like, I know, cause he's like he hangs out with my family pretty frequently. Like we're kind of my family's like his family away from his. Yeah. Like he'll spend holidays with us. And I think he really embraces like he really embraces celebrating holidays with a family that's not his, like to the point where my family, like even like my extended family has like embraced him as a part of it, which is super cool. To the point where my sister and her fiance actually asked him to be an usher in her wedding.
That's dope.
Isn't that sweet?
That's so cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. So it's like, it's things like that where it's like this is one of the many beautiful things about about the world we live in. And just like that connection, just even from the most wild of places. God is so good, you guys. So good.
It definitely, like, watching this movie makes me want to learn a foreign language.
An alien language?
It shows the power of being able to communicate.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And I mean, Louise in the film, she's like, you can understand communication and still end up single, which I think is a hilarious line. But I think in a lot of ways, right, communication enables connection. It's like the foundation for a connection, right?
And they're like every language comes down to like the same, like in some level, every language comes down to the same root anyway. So like even though it seems like for example, like English and like Japanese or something doesn't necessarily feel like there's a connection, but there's something deeply rooted in there. Yeah. That there is a link that we just don't always understand.
Oh, here we go. Okay, let's see. Language is the foundation of civilization. It is the glue that holds a people together. It is the first weapon drawn in a conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what does Ian say? He's like, it's not language, it's science, and talks out his butt for a couple minutes.
I mean, most characters Jeremy Renner plays talks out of their butt.
Well, what I find really interesting about his arc through this movie is he starts out very skeptical of her ability to bring about any meaningful change in the situation. And as she starts to make progress with his assistance, he starts to come around to the fact that she understands what she's doing. And also he's, of course, gradually falling for her as well.
Naturally.
But, more because she wants connection. She wants to connect with the aliens. She doesn't just want to exchange words with them. She wants to really understand them. And that's not something that you get an emphasis out of from all of the other countries that are talking to their respective spacecraft. In fact, like the Chinese, for example, at one point there's a scene where it's revealed that the Chinese are using mahjong to communicate with their aliens.
I thought that was really fascinating because then it makes you opponents.
Yeah. It forces you into an oppositional connection, which is not the kind of connection you want when aliens show up to your planet.
I do think it gives a lot of credit to America, probably more than we would actually have.
I was gonna say,
we're just like, oh yeah, we would definitely seek out a linguist. Okay.
I don't really think of this as like, I'll be honest, the rest of the American military is too busy. This is like its own little world that this movie takes place in, because the rest of the U.S. military, and I'm sure like we don't see the president here at any point, right? He's not sitting, he doesn't visit this site at all that's important enough to be shown in the movie. So like, to me at least, the unit that's working on this site is a fusion of a lot of different interests. But at the core of it, Luis, Ian, is he a colonel or a general? I can't remember.
Doctor Strange's surgical friend. Same actor, by the way.
Well, no, this is Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah, it's Forrest
right?
Whitaker.
Oh, Forrest Whitaker, who you're talking about.
Yeah. Forrest Whitaker, like they're
Good
all
old Rogue One, Forrest Whitaker.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We got
Save the rebellion.
We got Giselle, Saw Gerrera, and Hawkeye in the same movie.
Yeah. So
one of many multiversal crossovers that we experience on the show.
Well, and I remember I was thinking like, oh, it's Hawkeye's in this movie. Oh,
Yeah,
interesting, right? Of course, I'm like falling for that typecasting trap. But yeah, like the core cast, they're kind of in their own unit here, and I feel like everyone outside of them is doing very poorly, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
There's obviously like a clip of Alex Jones in there, and he's doing his thing, and but like everyone outside of this is dealing with like the fear mongering, and even Luis's mom is just like, on the phone. I love that Luis is talking to her at the start of the movie.
What was Louise's mom doing on the phone?
Just shouting.
Yes.
Soundbite.
Might have to soundbite that. But no, so like she's talking on the phone and you just hear Luis go, do I sound concerned? Right? Like she's just so bored. She sounds so bored, honestly.
I kind of thought that too.
I would say that there was an animal in this movie that they had a canary. But they didn't happen. Yes, they didn't have a cat.
It's the wrong sound, but it'll fly.
Yeah, why did they bring a cat in? Like she is a woman who lives by herself and drinks wine. I feel like she would have a cat.
Yeah, definite cat lady energy.
Yeah.
But
at the end of the day, and I'll transition here into our final thoughts. This movie really asks you about embracing life's challenges, because she sees her future. She sees a lot of pain. She sees a lot of heartbreak, but she also sees love, love and joy, and experiencing the life of her daughter, who is, by all accounts, a very talented individual. And it's very reflective of how human life is in general, that there is a lot of struggle and there's a lot of pain. But there's also a lot of love, right? And there's a lot of positivity that can come from this. And it's always important to keep that in mind. And in a lot of ways, the struggle is what makes the joys and the love all the better.
Amen.
It's also... Was that a siren?
Yeah, it sounded like a siren.
That's fun. Maybe
Yeah.
I should check our thing here just to make sure that we're not about to die.
I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, I think we're fine.
Yeah, that's very curious. It's
We're
not
fine.
the first. Oh, you know what? It's probably
It's not the first Wednesday of the month.
it's probably
Yeah.
Severe Weather Preparedness Month. So they might be doing it.
Usually,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, that's fair.
Anyway,
So anyway, we're just like, why are the sirens going off? What?
Maybe it's an alien attack.
Maybe the aliens have arrived.
We'll just have like a camera of our roof being ripped off by a tornado.
Yeah.
We're in the eye of the storm right now.
Yeah. But anyway, I digress.
I would be wild.
Yeah. But I digress. This is a movie that really asks about like or really shows you what it means to embrace life and all the challenges and all the joys that come with it. And it's a very beautiful personal story that kind of sits in this sci-fi framework. It's not an action movie, but it is a absolutely beautiful movie. And it really comes full circle. So yeah, I think for my score,
Okay.
Yeah.
I will give it I'll give it a 95. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like among the highest you've ever given something.
You've also, is this the first time you've gone first with a score too?
Maybe.
It might be. I don't know. We go in random orders.
Nick,
All
what do you
right.
got?
Yeah.
This is going to be another Genesius first. I actually gave it a lower score than you.
What?
I gave it a 91.
Okay.
91.
Still high
Still very high.
praise.
Still very high.
I was just there were like a couple things that didn't really settle with me. Like, one, it's not the most entertaining movie, which I wasn't necessarily expecting it to be, but like I did struggle watching it a little bit. Like I was confused a few times. I mean, the whole mind-blowing reveal at the end made it worth it, but
Yeah.
you have to get there.
yeah. And it's something I had a hard time watching it. Like if I watched it now, I'd probably appreciate it more, but this was my first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, 91. That's my score.
Man.
John?
That's
like
surprising.
a 63 or
So,
something.
no, not at all. Not even the slightest. For some reason, I don't know why this number was in my head at the beginning, but I think it is an amazing movie. I think it is very well filmed. I think it's enjoyable. I do think it's a little bit on the slow side. Like it would be hard for me to watch this. Like, and it's also very intense. Like Seth is kind of mentioning that it's hard to watch this movie a lot of times.
Yeah. It's very weighty.
That might be what affected my score. Was like it's not a rewatchable movie.
It's not nearly to this extent, but it's similar to like Schindler's List in that way. It's like a movie that you should watch, but you wouldn't want to watch it a ton of times.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but 94. That's kind of what I was
Wow. I gave it the lowest score.
You know, my gut is pushing me. My gut is pushing me to lower my score.
No, I was legitimately. So the thing was like, I was actually after like through our discussion, I was thinking of having it up more, but I'm like, I don't want to have the same number that Seth had.
Yeah.
So this gives it. So the average score is 93 and a third, which rounds down to 93. That is very satisfactory.
Yeah. Very
Yeah,
good.
no, it is a very good movie.
Yeah. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for an excellent discussion today.
This was probably one of my favorite discussions that we've had.
That's a spot for the bingo board. When you say that. Because we've had a couple of those moments.
We've had some great discussions.
It's not to
definitely a
devalue.
variety of discussions on this show.
Yeah, it's not to devalue when you say that, but it is a thing you've definitely said more than twice.
I
like,
enjoy talking to you guys about these kind of things.
How does it compare to like when we did The Room?
Well,
you dare not mention the holy name. No, just kidding.
well,
But
The Room. Well, okay, I should say that like it's one of my. Like I told you guys that I give hundreds to movies like in a different way than you guys do.
Yeah.
Same thing with conversations. Like this is one of my favorite conversations for entirely different reasons that the room was one of my favorite conversations.
That's fair.
Okay, but anyway, we should.
We should wrap up here. So thank you for
We
everyone
did
for
good
tuning in.
time-wise.
Yeah.
We did, yeah.
Thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode of the Genesius podcast. If you enjoyed our content and want to see or hear more from us, please subscribe to our podcast on whatever podcasting platform you use. You can find us on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. You can also find us on YouTube. Our handle is @Genesius Podcast, where you can see the shenanigans we get up to, as well as some pretty cool Lego sets, except for today, because we're in an alternate.
You're gonna see this architecture.
Well, there's a couple Lego sets behind us.
Yeah, but they're like,
you can't really see
They're
them on the
hidden.
screen.
They're hidden.
Yeah.
Yeah, we relocated probably not just this one time, but
Well, yeah.
yeah.
So
For the most part.
we're around.
Yeah. And if you would like us to talk about a movie you enjoy or some movie related topic you'd like us to discuss here on the Genesius podcast. Oh, that came out really weird. If you want to provide feedback for us to make our show even better, or if you just want us to pray for you, send us an email at genesiuspodcast@gmail.com. That's GENESIUS podcast@gmail.com. And if you want to come on the show as a guest, and you just make sure you know one of us three personally, or unless you're like Father Mike Schmitz or the Pope or some Catholic celebrity. Bishop Barron. Yeah, that'd be cool if he came on.
What if we got Jeff Cavins? That would be
Wouldn't
really
be opposed.
You've actually met
Unopposed.
him, right?
I've met Jeff, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you told him about this show?
No.
I mean, I also met Father Mike, but I didn't talk about this. We weren't even doing the show.
Oh,
yet,
next time I meet Father Mike, I'm telling him about the Genesius podcast. Anyway, yeah, like I said, if you know one of us three, also make sure you've listened to one of our episodes, which if you're hearing this, that means you have. Congrats. You're 1 for 2. Send us an email at genesiuspodcast@gmail.com or just message one of us three directly.
Finally, please spread the word about the Genesius podcast, whether it be on social media or word of mouth. If you're listening, turn to whoever you're in proximity to.
Like this. Hey, John, I'm sick. What should I listen to?
I know about this really good podcast that they have multiple seasons now.
Really?
You can go
Really?
through.
What's it
Yeah.
called?
The Genesius podcast.
What's the log line? Attract me to the show. Inspire me to put my ear holes to the headphones and take in
this
this
really
auditory goodness.
funny 3 Catholic dudes just talking about movies. Anyway, so that is some way that you could do that. You could also shoot them a text, whether that be family, friends, or coworkers, about our podcast, whether it be right at this moment, at a family dinner, at a work meeting, or on date night. Wherever you are,
Don't you
whatever
guys
you're
have work
doing.
meetings coming up tonight?
I do.
There you go. That would be a
Yeah.
good time.
Yeah.
Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, please tell them about us, and please pray for us as we continue to create content and use our gifts to give glory to God.
Amen, brother.
It's a lot of G's. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to lift up in a special way today people who suffer from anxiety and fear just about life.
It's a really good intention.
Who are really afraid of life. Because I've actually, with YouTube creators that I've followed, watched at various points as I was growing up. There was one person that I came across in particular. I won't drop names, but they kind of discussed like their number one objective in life is to avoid suffering. And I can tell there is just like this deep rooted fear that they had about the challenges that life might bring them. And admittedly, I've found that is something that I also struggle with, is like being afraid of that, of life in that way.
I think we all definitely struggle with that from time to time.
Yeah. So I just want to lift that up in prayer today.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think in a similar regard, any of those who are struggling with wanting to be a parent, whether that be like infertility or like miscarriages, or also just like the choice of choosing to have kids.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
And I would just I guess I'd like to offer up a prayer for not really relevant to this movie at all, but like just softball's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And just that we have a good season. We're at 20 teams this year, which is wild.
Yeah.
They asked me to be a manager this year, which I'm really excited about.
All right.
I mean, I'm co-managing. Thomas Ostrom, if you're listening, shout out to you because you're doing it with me. But it's an opportunity I have wanted for the past couple of years because I want to be able to give back to a community that provided a safe haven for me in probably one of the worst times of my life. So just prayers that it's a good season. And just even also just for, I guess, just for peace in general.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of stuff going on today in this world. And just with the lack of communication that goes on, that gets us that much closer, I think is vital to us uniting as like a church or just as a community.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, John, would you like to lead us in prayer?
Yeah. I can. Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Come, Holy Spirit. Lord Jesus, help us to be one body, especially in this time of Easter, through communicating with each other and creating safe havens for us. Also help those who are struggling with any kind of anxiety or avoidance of suffering, to remind them of you as in the agony in the garden, of the humanness of wanting to avoid it, but also still going through with what God has planned for us for. Also help us to choose life in our life, to help any of those who are struggling with infertility or miscarriages, and to put you above all else. As we pray in your name, our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Saint Genesius, pray for us. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That was beautiful, John. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
John, Seth, as always, thank you for joining me on the show today. And I should also give you an additional thank you for letting me come over in the middle of a weekday.
Yeah. Good to have you. Nice, refreshing break.
This was a nice change of pace from what we usually do.
Yeah.
But thanks for having me over. And thanks, as always, for doing this show with me. Like I said earlier, I love the discussions that we have on here.
Yeah.
And I love that you two guys are so game to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It means the world to me. It really does.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And of course, listeners, thank you for tuning in with us. Whatever time you're listening this and whenever you are, I worded that very badly. All right. We will be back next Friday at noon to talk about the Avengers.
Yes.
Because we've been building up. We've been talking about phase 1 for all this season so far, and it's finally coming to a head.
Is it finally assembled?
Oh, buddy. That was good. So now, actually, really funny you say that. One last tangent, and then we'll sign off here. But so as team managers, we're supposed to come up with team names.
Yeah.
Do you know what mine is? Now that I've claimed it, I can share. I think I can share it. My team name for summer 2023 fall summer softball, and Thomas approved of this.
Yeah.
Apostles Assemble.
Nice.
Ooh.
You can't tell me that's not good.
That's solid.
That's good.
That's solid.
Anyway, so I want to throw it out there because I've been waiting to use that one for a long time. So I'm so happy I finally got to. Anyway, yeah, until next Friday when we talk about the Avengers, we are the Genesius guys. I'm Nick.
Filling in for Kyle, I'm Seth.
I'm John.
And this is the Genesius podcast. God bless everyone.
And as they arrived, they quickly departed.